Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's video, we've got a couple of things to discuss, including a couple of signings, a couple of news updates to talk about, and some trade rumors involving the Philadelphia Flyers, the Ottawa Senators, and the Winnipeg Jets. So I'm going to all of that coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the Instant Hockey Channel. Now before I get started with the regular video stuff, I'll kick things off with a quick channel update. First, it's now very close to draft day. Once again, I'm doing a live video on draft day, my first live video on the channel, so don't forget to check that out. I'll be doing it, once again, at 4 p.m. Pacific time and 7 p.m. Eastern time on my channel, so definitely check that out. Stay tuned for 4 p.m. Pacific time to check out my live video. I'll definitely be hopefully doing pretty good on my first time there, so hopefully I'll do good. But if that video does do good, I will be doing another live video on Saturday for free agency, probably around 8:30 in the morning. There's going to be a lot of things happening over the next couple of days, so I think I should do a live video for both draft day and free agent frenzy. So definitely, after Wednesday, we'll probably have a couple of smaller videos discussing little bits of news, rumors, stuff like that, and then Saturday morning I'll be having another live video. So definitely stay tuned for those two things, with some big dates in the calendar right now, and definitely it sounds like there's going to be a ton of news over the next couple of weeks. So stay tuned at 4 p.m. Pacific time, 7 o'clock Eastern time, to watch my live video about the draft on Wednesday, so definitely check that out. And then on Wednesday, I'll probably have some more details about my Saturday live video, but it does sound like I'm trending towards doing a live video on Saturday. So definitely stay tuned for those two things, as I think I'll be able to do a couple of live videos along with some more of those smaller videos probably happening on like Thursday or Fridays. So definitely interesting to see, but definitely stay tuned for the Wednesday and Saturday live videos that I'm going to be doing on my channel. So that's all the channel updates I want to get to today. Next, we'll go over to some signings that have happened recently. So we'll get up to all the signings as of yesterday. Most of these are more depth signings. There are a couple of significant ones. We'll start with the Chicago Blackhawks, as they have signed right-wing forward Joey Anderson on a one-year contract extension of an average annual value of $775,000, and he'll begin at the start of next season. Now for Anderson, he's been with the Maple Leafs the past couple of years, was acquired in the Andreas Johnsson trade a few years back. He signed an extension that was for a couple of years with the Leafs. He was dealt to the Chicago Blackhawks in season this year when the Hawks acquired him in the Jake McCabe deal, and he actually did quite well. Last year with the Leafs, Anderson was able to put up 26 goals and 42 points to 56 AHL games. It was more of an AHL forward, but they get into a couple of NHL games, putting up no points in 5 games. But this year, splitting time with the Leafs and the Hawks, he also split time with the Leafs and the Hawks AHL affiliates. So in the AHL, he's once again put up some solid numbers, getting 14 goals and 30 points in 32 games, but at the NHL level, a lot more productive, putting up 6 goals and 9 points in 38 games. So Anderson looks like a pretty good bottom six forward, with the Hawks having a little bit of a weaker team and wanting to be at least a tiny bit more competitive than they were last year. I think Anderson could definitely challenge for like a bottom six role, third, fourth line role. I definitely think that's a possibility. I wouldn't be surprised if he was to go to the minors. I think at this point in time he's reestablished himself as a solid NHL option. So I think Anderson could definitely be like a good, solid third, fourth line winger for the Hawks, and I think re-signing him was the right move. So a good sign for the Hawks, and Anderson should continue to be a really good forward for them. Over with the Columbus Blue Jackets, they signed Carson Mayer to a one-year contract extension of average annual value of $775,000, and they'll begin at the start of next year. Now, for Mayer, he's another good young prospect for the Jackets. Once again, he's been playing majority of the seasons in minors. He has gotten a little bit of NHL opportunities. 2 years ago with Columbus, he had 16 goals and 27 points in 57 AHL games, so he was solid at the AHL level, and then put up a goal and 3 points in 17 NHL games. So he looked really good. Once again, he started last year in the AHL, putting up 9 goals, 26 points in 34 games, so he looked really solid there. And then he was called up, got an assist in 14 NHL games. So Mayer, I think, has the potential to be a solid middle six option at the NHL level, whether it be on the second or third line. I definitely see him being a really good potential middle six forward, but at this point in time, I think he's still developing a little bit. So the Jackets do have a deep team, so it would not surprise me at all if he was developing once more next year and he was more of an AHL forward. But I also wouldn't be surprised if he was able to carve out like a third line role next year on the Jackets roster for him. So it wouldn't surprise me too much, and I think he could fit in really well with the Jackets. So whether it be the AHL level developing for 1 more year or whether he goes straight to the AHL next year, I do think that he has a good middle six potential and eventually should be a solid NHL forward. Next, we have with the Minnesota Wild goalie Hunter Jones. Hunter Jones signed a 1-year contract extension of an average annual value of $788,000, and the deal began at the start of next year. Now, for Jones, he's a solid third-string goalie who was playing mostly in the ECHL these past couple of years. 2 years ago, he played in the ECHL, put up a 4.04 goals against average and an .878 save percentage in 22 games. They get into 9 AHL games, did not do overly well. This past year was a lot more better at the ECHL level, putting up 3.07 goals against average and a .906 save percentage in 38 games. And also got on to one an AHL game and did fantastic. So the Wild saw that he could have some NHL potential, and they were willing to sign him. So definitely, I think it's a really solid deal for the Wild. I think eventually maybe Hunter Jones could challenge for a backup role at the NHL level. Not anywhere close right now. He's probably still going to need development in the AHL level for the next couple of years. But I think in time Jones could still be a solid NHL level goalie. So probably still a couple of years away, but a solid extension there for the Minnesota Wild to get a goalie locked up for the next couple of years. Next, we have the Buffalo Sabres. They signed Joseph Cessione to a 1-year contract extension of average value of $775,000, and they'll be at the start of next year. Now, Cessione was a player with the Dallas Stars a couple of years ago, was traded in season to the Buffalo Sabres for Oskari Laaksonen. Once again, Cessione is a really decent AHL defender. 2 years ago with the Dallas Stars affiliates, he put up a goal and 16 points in 65 AHL games. This year he was able to get 3 goals, 10 points in 53 games, but that was with both the Stars and the Sabres AHL affiliates. So he definitely looked like he did okay. He's a decent AHL defender. I'm not sure if he'll ever make the NHL roster, maybe on a couple of call-ups. But I definitely think that Cessione is a decent depth player who could be a possible call-up if need be. So, a good signing for the Sabres to sign Cessione, who I think could be a good AHL top 4 defenseman, and maybe a good call-up option if the Sabres run into some injuries. So definitely a nice signing there for the Sabres to get some more added depth on the defensive end. Then with the Philadelphia Flyers, they added one of their depth defensemen in Louis Belpedio, as he signed a 2-year, $775,000 deal with the Philadelphia Flyers that will begin at the start of next year. Now, for Belpedio, he does have 4 games of NHL experience under his belt, but has been spending the past couple of years in the minors alone. 2 years ago with the Montreal Canadiens AHL affiliate, he put up 11 goals and 30 points in 64 AHL games. He did solid there. He signed a 1-year deal in Philadelphia, and he put up 3 goals and 27 points in 70 AHL games. So he's definitely more of an AHL defender right now. I definitely think that with the Flyers going through a little bit of a change on the blue line, he could get a shot in NHL level as like a 7th defenseman or maybe a 3rd-pair defenseman. And if not, he should definitely be a call-up option. So I definitely think Belpedio could definitely be a solid AHL defender for the Flyers, but could also be a call-up option and maybe even a 7th defenseman. So I think that's a possibility. Belpedio, like I said, has a couple of NHL games under his belt, but not too many. So hopefully he can get his opportunities at the NHL level with a weaker team like the Flyers. But I think this is a good signing for both Belpedio and Philadelphia, getting him signed to a couple of year contract extension. And then over with the St. Louis Blues, they signed Scott Perunovich to a 1-year contract extension of average annual value of $795,000, and the deal will begin at the start of next year. Now for Perunovich, he's a solid defender who is probably projected to be a good top 4 defenseman in the NHL level, but hasn't really been able to break through. 2 years ago, he split time between AHL and NHL, put up 3 goals and 22 points in 17 AHL games, and then also had 6 assists in 19 NHL games, so he was definitely up and down the lineup. Had a lot of aspirations to make the lineup this year, but suffered an injury that kept him out for basically the entire season. He was able to get into a couple AHL games to finish up the year, putting up 3 goals and 20 points in 22 AHL games. So he was not able to make the NHL roster this year, but I do think he should be able to make it next year, at the very least, as a third pair defenseman. So I think Perunovic is a really good defenseman. I think he will be eventually a good top pair, maybe top four defenseman, and I think he does have some high potential, but due to injuries and not being overly consistent, he has yet to make the NHL roster on a consistent basis. So hopefully he is able to make the roster in the not too distant future. I do expect him to be at least a consistent third pair defenseman this year, but I definitely think it's a really big year for him to make sure that he is able to get into the NHL. So hopefully this deal is good for both sides, as it's league minimum, so they don't sign Perunovic too much, and Perunovic is going to have a really good showing this year to show that he's still a really good NHL defender. So a good signing there for Perunovic. And lastly here, with the biggest signing of the bunch, and that is Jordan Staal of the Carolina Hurricanes. Now, Captain Jordan Staal of the Carolina Hurricanes was a pending UFA. There was a lot of talk early on that a deal between the Canes and Staal would get done at some point. But on Thursday on the TSN Insider Trading, that sounded like they were far apart and they might not be able to work out an extension. But late on Saturday night, there was a lot of talk that all those hurdles that they would need to go through were getting done, and that Staal was looking like he was going to get signed, and it has happened. So Staal gets signed on a 4-year deal with an average annual value of $2.9 million, and the deal will be going to start next year. Now for Staal, he's been with the Carolina Hurricanes the past couple of years. He's been a solid NHL center. He's basically been in the third-line center role. He's a solid shutdown center, playing behind Aho and whoever they have at second-line center. Staal is probably going to be a really good center for the next couple of years. He's put up 3 straight 30-point seasons with the Hurricanes, including 2 years ago getting 17 goals and 36 points in 78 games, and this year putting 17 goals and 34 points in 81 games. So definitely, Staal's a really good point producer, definitely a really good all-around center who I think could definitely help that team. The $2.9 million contract is a little bit expensive in my opinion. I thought it would have been a 2-3-year deal somewhere closer to $2 million. It's not a huge overpayment, but I do think it's a little bit of a longer term than I was thinking that the Canes would be able to get. But definitely, I think keeping their captain around and a solid center who can help them is not a bad deal for the Hurricanes. So definitely, I do like what Staal brings to the Hurricanes. He's a good captain, he's a solid NHL player, and I think he should continue to be a really good force for the Carolina Hurricanes. So definitely, I like this deal for the Hurricanes, and I think even though it's a little bit more term and a little bit more money than I was expecting, I still think it's a solid deal for both Staal and the Hurricanes. So definitely, I like all these signings. Staal should continue to be a good, solid third-line center in Carolina. I think Perunovic should be an NHL defender this year, at least a third-pair role. I think both Pelpedio and Sessione are more AHL defensemen who should start this season in the minors, but I wouldn't be surprised, especially in Pelpedio's spot, if he was called up at some point in the season. Hunter Jones, solid third-string goalie, probably still going to need a couple years development in the AHL before he challenges for an NHL role. Then Carson Mayer in Columbus is a solid AHL prospect who I think should probably continue to develop in the AHL next year. And Joey Anderson in Chicago I think should continue to be a really solid bomb 6 forward in Chicago. So solid signings all around for the NHL, and we'll probably gonna have a lot more signings before and after free agency. So definitely stay tuned for all those news and rumors as well. Next we go over to the news update part of the video. Now there's not been very much news over the past little while since our last video yesterday when we were talking about some trades with Johansson and Dursey. There hasn't been any more official trades yet, so nothing to talk about there. There's also been no buyout since last week when Arizona bought out Cassian and Nemeth. So no buyout stuff to talk about there. There's one big piece of news that is happening soon, and that is that today is a word day. So I'll most likely be talking about this during my live video at some point. But today is the day when all the awards get handed out. So like the Norris Trophy, the Vezina, the Jack Adams, etc. So we'll know who all of the trophies go to this year. So definitely one interesting to see, and I'll probably talk about that during my live video, which is my next news video. But definitely, it's going to be interesting to see, and I think that's a pretty big thing. So we may not see as many trades today as usually would with the draft coming up, but it's definitely going to be interesting to see who goes to the awards today. So interesting stuff, but that's definitely going to be one of the hot topics today. But that's all the news I'm going to get to today. And lastly, here we go over to the trade rumor part of the video. Now we'll start with the Philadelphia Flyers. And we'll talk about this possible deal with the St. Louis Blues. Now, the early part of Saturday, there was a lot of talk surrounding Philadelphia and St. Louis. There was a lot of talk from multiple sources saying that they were talking about a trade that involved Kevin Hayes. And it expanded later in the day, saying that it was going to be a deal that was around 6 to 7 pieces. And it was going to be a huge mega deal. But then it hit a snag with one of the players not willing to move the no-trade clause. And at this point, it seems like that player who's not willing to move the no-trade clause is St. Louis Blues defenseman Torey Krug. So it sounded like the trade at this point in time, I'm not sure what sort of details they're in, but sounded like Travis Sanheim, who's about to start an 8-year contract extension, and Kevin Hayes were both going to go as part of a trade package to the St. Louis Blues. And the Blues are going to try and send Philadelphia Torey Krug and at least one first-round pick. A lot of people do think it was like the 25th overall pick, which was the St. Louis's pick they got from Toronto. So that was sort of the basis of the package. Krug and a first-round pick in this year's draft for Hayes and Sanheim. So that's sort of what the Flyers and Blues are trying to work on, as much as I can get from the reports. It does sound like with Krug not willing to move his no-trade clause, it was held up, and it doesn't seem like it's going on right now. There's also a lot of talk that if Krug can waive his no-move clause, the deal could probably go through. And there's also some talk now saying that the Flyers may try and flip Krug so he can waive his no-movement clause to go somewhere else. So it definitely sounds like those are the sort of deals we're looking at here between the Philadelphia Flyers and St. Louis Blues. I think that would be a pretty good deal. If Philly can flip Krug to another team, get another piece of picks and prospects, I think that would be a really good deal for Philadelphia, and getting another first-round pick in this year's deep draft. We know St. Louis is probably not going to keep all of their first-round picks for this upcoming draft, so it definitely does sound like they will try and move at least one. And if it can get them a solid second-line center like Kevin Hayes, who could sort of take over Ryan O'Reilly's role on the team, and a solid upgrade on the defense with Travis Sanheim, I think the Blues would definitely do it. So we're going to have to wait and see. Like we said, there's a rumored deal that seems like it could still happen. So I would expect definitely more pieces than just those 4. But it definitely sounded like the basis of the deal, as far as I could hear, was Sanheim and Hayes to St. Louis for Krug and a first-round pick. And it sounded like with Krug not willing to move his no-trade clause, that sort of held up the deal. But it sounds like this could still happen. It also sounds like Tony DeAngelo deal is also being held up due to reasons. There was a lot of talk also on Saturday night that DeAngelo would be dealt at some point on Sunday to Carolina to go back to them for possibly a decent prospect. And then on Sunday morning, Pierre LeBrun tweeted out that it hit a snag and that they had to reconstruct the deal or it would not be able to work. And it still hasn't happened yet. So Philadelphia has a couple of options right now they're trying to do. We know they're trying to move as many pieces as they can. So they look like they're trying to still work out a deal with St. Louis, even if it doesn't include Krug because he was not willing to move his no trade clause. It does sound like there's still some interest on both sides to get a deal done. So something we're going to have to watch out for, as well as DeAngelo. As even if they don't move him to Carolina, there's probably still a couple of teams out there who could use a solid offensive defenseman like a Tony DeAngelo, so I definitely think there's some interest there. So they've also got a couple of other guys like Konechny, Lawton, and Hart, who could also be moved at some point in the next couple of days. So definitely going to be interesting to see, but I feel that the Flyers could be making a couple of moves in the not-too-distant future, and even though both deals are hold up, it looks at this point in time like we could see Hayes go to St. Louis and DeAngelo go to Carolina, but we'll have to wait and see. And I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments. If that is the rumored deal, Hayes and Sanheim and possibly other things for Krug, a first-round pick, and possibly other things. What do you think of that deal, if that is the sort of basis of the trade package? Who would win that sort of a deal? Would it be the Blues or would it be the Flyers? And does DeAngelo going back to Carolina make sense? Definitely let me know down in the comments. With the Ottawa Senators, there's a couple things. Karlsson was asked by a couple of reporters if he'd be willing to return to Ottawa, and he said he wouldn't be against going back to Ottawa. We know that Erik Karlsson is looking for a trade. We know that the Senators could definitely use maybe another good defenseman. It's not overly important, so I definitely don't think it's a guarantee that they will be willing to move a lot of things for like an Erik Karlsson. But just interesting to see that Erik Karlsson wouldn't rule out a return back to Ottawa. He played some of his best years in Ottawa, definitely besides this past year, but definitely a lot of his best hockey was played in Ottawa, so I definitely think going back to Ottawa wouldn't be too bad for him, but definitely has to make sense for both sides. I'm definitely not sure if Ottawa will be willing to move stuff for Erik Karlsson, just given the fact that they're in win-now mode at this point in time. So I definitely think Karlsson could help them, but he definitely comes with a pretty big price tag, and his cap is completely high. So I definitely do think that it'll be quite difficult to acquire Erik Karlsson. But it does sound like he at least has some interest in going there. So it sounds like maybe add Ottawa to the list of teams who could possibly deal for Erik Karlsson. It's not a guarantee, but once again, I do think it's a possibility. So definitely something we have to keep our eye on over the next little while to see if it will come to fruition. Also, the fourthperiod.com's David Pagnotta said on a tweet that the Ottawa Senators are still heavily shopping DeBrincat and having discussions with multiple teams. He says they could get a first-round pick for DeBrincat, but that's not necessary to make a move. They could look to move DeBrincat for like a player-for-player swap. And he does bring up the fact that Detroit does have 2 first-round picks, and they could try and move one to get DeBrincat. So, once again, we know that there's a couple of teams DeBrincat will be willing to sign a contract extension with, one being Detroit, one being Dallas, one being Nashville. I do wonder about all 3 of those teams. Nashville has a boatload of cap space and some pretty good draft picks and prospects. Dallas has some pretty good players that they could move. Detroit does a little bit, but it's, once again, still be hesitant to trade him to Detroit given the fact that they're division rivals. So definitely interesting to see, but it sounds like the DeBrincat trade could happen in the not too distant future, and he could be dealt in the not too distant future, maybe in the next couple of days before the draft. And lastly here with the Winnipeg Jets, there's a lot of talk right now that the Winnipeg Jets and the LA Kings are talking about a Pierre-Luc Dubois trade, and it could have happened at some point over the week. It didn't happen, so there's a lot more speculation going on. At first, it sounded like the Kings had interest. I mean, come on, adding a guy like Dubois to that team would make it an extremely lethal center group with guys like Kopitar, Dubois, and Danault down the middle. So that would be a lethal 1-2-3 punch for the next couple of years at the center position. But it's definitely interesting to see if they are able to do so, as there was a lot of talk that guys like Velarde and Iafallo were of interest to the Winnipeg Jets and could have been dealt to a move. And then there was also a lot of talk around the fact that the LA Kings were given permission to talk to Dubois and that they could try and be working on an extension. But now it sort of sounds like the extension talks haven't really taken place yet. And we do know that Dubois really wants to go to Montreal. So if he's going to sign an extension with LA, it'll probably have to be for a bit more than what he would probably sign with the Montreal Canadiens. So the Kings might have to overpay him a bit, and they don't have too much cap space for this year. So getting a deal worked out is going to be difficult for the Kings, given the fact he still wants to go to Montreal long term. But I do think there's a strong possibility that the Kings are now the front runners for Dubois. It sounds like a trade package involving Iafallo, Velarde really does interest Winnipeg, and that if they could get those 2 guys plus maybe something else, could definitely be a really good return for Dubois in a situation that was sort of a lose-lose situation for them. So definitely interesting to see, but it sounds like Dubois to LA is a very likely possibility right now. And guys like Velarde and Iafallo could be the guys going back to Winnipeg, and if they can get a contract extension in place and the deal works out for both sides, I definitely think this could be a really big win for both sides, both Winnipeg and LA. But definitely doesn't sound like anything's a done deal right now, and there could definitely still be some other things that need to happen. So definitely not done yet, but it sounds like it's definitely a possibility, and LA might have just surpassed Montreal as the frontrunners to land Dubois. So definitely interesting to see. Love to hear your thoughts down in the comments about those 2 things. Does DeBrincat get dealt in the next couple of days? If so, where does he get dealt to? And does Dubois get dealt to LA, or does he still try and go up to Montreal? Definitely let me know what you think down in the comments. But that's all I'm going to talk about for today. Remember to like this video, and if you really do like it, then remember to subscribe. We're closing in on 100 subscribers, so definitely if you can subscribe, I'd really appreciate it. I also do a blog I do things like trade rumors, trade news, trade bait boards, off-season plan stuff, all of that stuff. So definitely I'll leave a link to that down in the description below. And I can't wait to see you guys all for the next video. See you guys soon.